Imagine that something came into your home that you believed was your loved one, or you believed was the person that you trust most in the world. But soon you realize that this is something totally different, something that's masquerading as your loved one. This is what happened in the two supposedly true stories we're looking at today. A young woman named Savannah was attending college, and like many college students, her first year she lived in the dorm, but then after that she was able to get an apartment with her best friend. And this was a friend that she had known literally her whole life. Ever since preschool they had been best friends, so being able to live together in an apartment was really a dream come true for both of them. And it was great. They just had the kind of relationship where they knew what each other was thinking without even having to open up their mouths. And in their apartment, they didn't really have normal boundaries. They were totally fine if the other one went into their room to grab something. Even if the door was closed, you just had to knock first, and then you were welcome to come in and grab whatever you needed. They shared everything together, and it was really a perfect situation. And the first semester together goes by great, no issues at all. The apartment's nice. I mean, it's not a big luxury apartment, but it's a pretty typical college apartment, and they were just very grateful for what they had. About halfway through the second semester that they were living together, one day Savannah comes back to the apartment after class, and she goes into the kitchen to kind of put a little meal together for herself, and her mother calls. And so she answers the phone, and she's talking to her mother while she's kind of trying to put together some food, so she's a little preoccupied doing two things at once. The way that the apartment was set up was you had the kitchen where the main entrance to the apartment was, and then a living room, and then you could see all the way down the apartment there was a hallway, and on either side of the hallway were their bedrooms. So on one side of the apartment was the roommate's bedroom, and then on the other side was Savannah's bedroom. So as Savannah is on the phone with her mother and trying to put together her food, she sees her roommate exit Savannah's room, and walk across the hall into the roommate's room. It looked to Savannah like she was getting ready to go somewhere, that she had just taken a shower. It looked like her hair was wet. She had very long black hair and very fair skin. And it looked like she just walked into Savannah's room, maybe grabbed something, and then was walking back into her room to finish getting ready. And since Savannah was on the phone with her mother, she didn't, call over to her to say hello. She just figured, once I get off the phone with my mother and once my roommate's done getting ready to go wherever she's going to go, I'm sure we'll catch up and talk about each other's day. So eventually Savannah finishes putting together her food, and she says goodbye to her mother, and she takes her food back into her room and just decides to watch some TV while she eats her food. After about an hour, she had finished her food, and she hears a sound out in the kitchen. And she assumes that it's the roommate. So she grabs her plate and she leaves her room, and she walks down the hallway into the kitchen, and sure enough, the roommate's there, kind of getting some food together herself. And Savannah says to her, "Hey, sorry I didn't say hi to you earlier. I was on the phone with my mom. Did you get what you needed?" And the roommate kind of looks at her and is like, "What are you talking about?" And Savannah says, "Well, when I got home earlier, I saw you. It looked like you were leaving my room and going into your room. It looked like you were just taking a shower. Did you get what you needed out of my room?" And the roommate's eyes get very wide, and her mouth opens up, and she says, "Savannah, I need to show you something in my car. Come with me." And she grabs Savannah by the wrist and yanks her out the door and starts walking very fast over to her car. And Savannah's thinking, what the heck is going on? What's gotten into my roommate? And she opens the door to the car and almost throws Savannah into the car before going around to the other side and jumping in and locking the doors. And the roommate turns to Savannah and says, "Savannah, I just got home. I've been at my boyfriend's since yesterday. This was the first time I got home. When was this that you said you saw me?" And Savannah says, "This was like an hour ago." And the roommate looks at her and says, "Savannah, that wasn't me. There's somebody in our apartment." And the roommate is starting to breathe heavily and starting to panic, and this is making Savannah start to panic, and the roommate picks up her cell phone and calls the police and says to them, "I think there's somebody in our apartment. Can you please send somebody over?" And so after she calls the police, she also calls the property manager to tell them, "Look, I think somebody has broken into our apartment. The police are coming over right now. Can you come over too?" So the police get there very fast. Only about 5 minutes later, a police car shows up and briefly talks to Savannah and the roommate, and Savannah tells them exactly what she saw. That she was in the kitchen putting some food together and talking to her mother, and she saw what she thought was her roommate going from her room into the roommate's room. But clearly it wasn't her, because the roommate hadn't been home in 24 hours at that point. And so the officers, there were 2 officers, they go into the apartment and they search everything extremely thoroughly. They don't just check each room, they check under the beds, they check even inside of the cabinets, they check underneath the furniture, they check literally everywhere. They even check the windows to make sure that all the windows were locked, and sure enough, all of them were. They found no sign of anybody in that apartment. And as the police were searching the apartment, the roommate said to Savannah, I didn't want to tell you this because I didn't want to scare you, but for a few weeks now, in the middle of the night, I've been hearing things in our bathroom, like shampoo bottles moving around and that sort of thing, and I'll go in there to check, and there's nobody there, and nothing's out of place. The 2 girls don't know what to make of this. Savannah is absolutely sure that she saw somebody. It wasn't just like she saw a shape out of the corner of her eye. She saw a person that looked just like her roommate. The same height, the same long black hair, the same skin tone, everything. They didn't know what to make of it. Fortunately, they had a very good landlord who beefed up the security, put heavy-duty locks on the door, put very good locks on the windows, replaced all the glass with glass that's very difficult to break. And after that, they never had another strange experience. But the 2 of them never knew what to make of this weird experience that they both had. A woman named Margaret lived in a house with her husband and her daughter, who was 11 years old. When the COVID-19 shutdowns happened, unfortunately, her husband lost his job. Thankfully, he was able to find another one pretty quickly, and one that actually paid better than the job he used to have. The only downside to this new job was that it was at night. So 4 nights a week, her husband had to work from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. It was a little bit difficult, especially since the husband frequently had to work Friday nights and Saturday nights, and those were the days they used to do things together as a family. So whenever the husband worked these shifts on Friday nights and Saturday nights, she always tried to do something with her daughter just to make sure that her daughter was okay. And on this particular night, they planned to have just a fun little movie night together, and they would order some pizza and eat popcorn and drink sodas and that sort of thing. So around 8:15, the husband goes off to work and they start watching their movies. They finish one movie, they're starting another movie. It's about 11 p.m. at this point, and Margaret hears the doorknob downstairs, the back door that leads into the kitchen, start to open. And she just assumes that it's her husband coming home, that he probably forgot something. His workplace wasn't very far away, so it wasn't unheard of that he would just come home and grab something and go right back to work. So she comes downstairs and starts heading into the kitchen, and she runs into her husband. It was him. He had come home, and she asks him, "Hey, is everything okay?" And he says, "Yeah, no, everything's fine. I forgot my leg brace." He had a very physically demanding job, and unfortunately he had some knee problems. So whenever he was working, he would wear this knee brace, and on this particular night, he had just forgotten it. And she says, "Oh, okay," and she kind of jokes around about him being forgetful, and so he starts heading upstairs and goes into the bedroom and grabs the knee brace, and he pokes his head in and says hello to his daughter, and she says hello back, and then he walks downstairs and out the back door in the kitchen, and he leaves. And that was that. It was a totally normal experience. There was nothing strange about it. Until the next day. The next day, the husband gets home around 6:30 in the morning. And when he gets home, Margaret just kind of makes a little joke about him forgetting the knee brace. And he just kind of looks at her confused and says, "Margaret, what are you talking about?" And she says, "Last night, around 11 p.m., maybe a little bit after 11 p.m., you came home. You said you forgot your knee brace, and you went upstairs and you got it, and you said hello to our daughter, and then you left." And the husband starts to get a very worried look on his face and says, "Margaret, I didn't come home last night. I didn't forget my knee brace. I had it with me the whole time. I haven't been home since I left originally yesterday." And Margaret is kind of in disbelief. She's saying, if this is a joke, this isn't very funny. We both saw you. We know it was you. And the daughter overhears this, and she walks in and she says, you said hello to me. I know it was you. I know my own father. It was you. And the husband is still insisting, no, that was not me. I didn't come home. I don't know what you guys saw, but it wasn't me. I didn't come home. And so now everyone's wondering, who's the crazy person here? Margaret's thinking, is it me and my daughter, or is it my husband? Is he trying to play a joke on us? If he is, it's not very funny, because when he left, he kissed me on the lips. If that wasn't my husband, who kissed me on the lips? So they had a security camera. They had one security camera that covered the back door of the house. That was the only one they had. Unfortunately, they didn't have any interior cameras, but they did have the one that covered the door that the husband may or may not have come in. And so they pull up the footage, and they're all crowding around the computer, and they watch every second of footage from 10:30 p.m. to 11:30 p.m., which they are 100% sure that the husband came home just after 11 p.m. But on that footage, they don't see anything. Not only does the husband not come home, nobody comes home. Nobody is on that footage. As far as they can tell, the back door never even opened. If it was only me, maybe I could say this was just a really realistic dream, or maybe I was having some kind of hallucination. But I wasn't drinking, and I don't do drugs, and my daughter saw it too. Margaret is so convinced that they both saw it. She even checks the carbon monoxide detectors, because she's saying that's the only thing I could think of is we were being poisoned by carbon monoxide and we were having the same hallucination. But sure enough, the detectors worked fine. They ended up moving out of that house a couple years later for unrelated reasons, but to this day they still don't know what to make of it. It's of course creepy, but Margaret was severely disturbed by it, because she's saying to herself, whoever or whatever this was said hello to my daughter and kissed me on the lips. And if that wasn't my husband, who or what was it?